Hey everyone, how are you today? This is Jim Prusak, physical therapist from the Pain PT, and good to see you guys. If you guys enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. I'm looking forward to 2024 and continuing to give you guys great content for healing and moving forward from a brain and nervous system perspective. And today we're going to touch base at an entry level to talk about your deepest, darkest emotion and the one that many of you don't know about or may not be aware of that's operating in you that could be impacting you negatively with your somatic symptoms. And this emotion is the emotion of shame. And a lot of people I speak to and talk to say, Jim, I don't resonate with that emotion of shame. I don't feel ashamed, or I don't think I feel that way. But once we start talking about it, people realize that actually they're filled with shame. Shame is running behind the scenes, operating under the surface, and creating and sustaining and making a person behave and act and believe in certain ways. So we're going to go over this emotion today on an entry level. So again, shame is a normal emotion. All emotions are normal. When it comes in a healthy way, we feel ashamed when we have done something to harm somebody else, and we've done it in a way that's not right, in a societal way that's not right. We feel bad. We feel bad for having done this thing. It's very closely associated with guilt, shame, but it's not the same thing. But we're talking about a different kind of shame than just typical shame. We're talking about what's called toxic shame. And this is a shame that develops in childhood from our parents, typically, and from other people in our lives throughout our lives who treated us poorly, treated us with disrespect, with criticism, with neglect, were hard on us. They blamed us. They shamed us, essentially. Okay, so what can happen with this toxic shame is it was born out of other people's behaviors towards us and actions towards us and even unspoken intentions towards us. And as a child, we have internalized that, because that's what children do, into a belief about ourselves now. So shame, we're talking about shame as a core belief, a negative core belief about ourselves. It's not just an emotion. There is an emotional component to it in ourselves, but essentially it's a core belief about ourselves that we are living off. Think of it as a software program running in your system that you may be living off of. And it's one we really need to work to delete, to remove, to see, to recognize. And we'll go over more about this in future talks. But for today, I want to go over some of the signs of underlying shame that you might not recognize in yourself, or it might be appearing and having an impact on you. So I'm going to start today with a quote from Gabor Mate. Many of you guys know. And he says, shame is the deepest of the negative emotions, a feeling we will do almost anything to avoid. Unfortunately, our abiding fear of shame impairs our ability to see reality. And again, the reality is that shame is toxic. It's not telling you the truth. Shame, in a sense, is a lie. Okay, but it becomes so deeply embedded in us that we believe it to be true. It's a very interesting emotion. A lot of people have difficulty with it because they feel a certain way. They don't feel good. They feel bad. And even though they may understand intellectually that they're not, they feel so bad, and that overpowers their ability to regulate that emotion. It's a quote by Anais Nin that says, shame is the lie someone told you about yourself. Shame is the lie someone told you about yourself. And that's why they call it toxic shame, because it's very toxic to us. It's very damaging to us. It's again, this idea that you feel bad. You're made to feel bad. Okay, we're going to go over again some of the things that we see in people, some of the signs of shame. And before I even do that, I just want to give you guys a study to support shame as one of the emotions here that can create somatic symptoms in the body. There's a lot of talk in this mind-body world about suppressed, repressed anger, and also fear/anxiety as being contributing emotions to somatic symptoms in the body. But shame seems to get a lot less airplay, a lot less exposure and talk. So I really want to bring it to light because I think it's really important. There was a research paper in the Journal of Pain, which is a very well-known journal this year, April 2023. And the title of the journal article was Daily Fluctuations in Feelings of State Shame are associated with greater daily pain severity and interference. So again, they followed these people through a study here, 182 young adults and students. And for 2 consecutive weeks, I asked them about their current pain severity and pain interference in their life, and as well as their state feelings of shame. And so what they did was they followed these people over the 2 weeks, and they found that shame significantly predicted pain severity and pain interference, such that participants experienced greater pain severity and interference on days they felt more shame. The findings suggest that the negative self-conscious emotion of shame may modulate pain experiences. It represents a potential target for clinical intervention within pain treatment and care. And that's why we are addressing this today, because again, I don't think it's addressed enough. They even mentioned this in the article here, that it's surprising. Okay, so we see shame, which again is that we'll go over some of the attributes of shame, but it's frequently documented in people's accounts of their pain experience, yet is often overlooked in the research. And I would say it's very much overlooked in even the mind-body field, let alone in regular medicine. It's definitely not looked at in regular medicine, but even in this mind-body work, it's not looked at enough. And they go on to say this is surprising, considering that the negative affect and emotions predict pain outcomes, and that shame predicts worse health-related outcomes in other mental and physical domains. So it's been shown already in other studies to predict worse mental and physical health outcomes. So it's significant. It's important emotion that we need to look at. Okay. What are some of the signs that you may be operating from the software program of shame in you, from this core belief that, again, you're not enough? Okay. And that's what shame is about, as a core belief that we are broken. We are not enough. We're not good enough. We're less than. Not as good as. Okay, so some of the things that we see with underlying shame, again, is this feeling, again, of just feeling bad. You feel bad a lot. Okay, internally, that word bad represents shame. You don't feel good enough at times. You maybe don't feel capable enough, strong enough. You don't believe you're going to get better. You feel less than at some level. When you look at somebody else, you compare yourself to other people. Okay, you try to be better than other people, make yourself better than, because you feel less than. So the only reason why you would try to be better than is because you don't feel like you're enough. Okay, that's a sign of underlying shame. Or you feel the need, you have to prove yourself. You have to prove your self-worth. You have to be doing all the time to feel better. Okay, we're human beings, we're not human doings. And when shame is operating, you see a lot of people who will be quite successful in the world, but they are overachievers. They're going so hard and working so hard and doing so much so they can feel better on the inside. And that means they're operating from shame. It's not helpful. It's not healthy. In the long run, it can get us into trouble because it's not sustainable. It's not going to eradicate the shame. Okay. You might feel like you're not doing enough. Okay. You're not doing enough. You're not doing the right treatment. You're not doing it right. That's a sign of shame. You're not contributing enough in society. That's a sign of shame. Okay. You might feel like or fear rejection. Okay. You fear rejection, or you feel like you're being rejected. It's a big sign of shame. Okay. It's something we see. You're sensitive to criticism. You're very sensitive to being criticized. is another sign that's poking the shame nerve in you. It's hitting a nerve in you of shame. Or maybe you take the blame of something. Some things happen, and you always take the blame, you swallow it. Okay, when you swallow your anger, which is another emotion, it turns into shame. Okay, so when you're mad and you swallow that, it becomes feeling bad. That's called taking the blame for something that is not your fault. And shame makes it feel like it's your fault. Do you feel like it's your fault? That's shame, especially when it's not your fault. That's called toxic shame now. When we look at it logically and we go, that's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong, but you feel bad. That's your toxic shame showing. Or more commonly, and very common in people with these conditions, people blame themselves. When you start to blame yourself, in other words, when you're hard on yourself, in other words, when you beat yourself up, in other words, when you're critical of yourself, self-criticism, that's a sign of underlying shame. Remember, shame was something that was put into you, something that was learned, something that was acquired, something that you've internalized from your parents and other people who treated you poorly, made you feel this way. And again, as a child, you would have absorbed all of that. You would not have the capacity to know that it wasn't your fault. You will believe something's wrong with you. And then you start operating off of that platform in the rest of your life. So the self-criticism is a very common one. And we could say, whose voice is that in your head? Being self-critical means somebody else was critical of you. If you're hard on yourself, it means somebody else was hard on you. Again, shame was acquired. So you can explore that in a different way to see where the roots of this came from. Other things that result from shame are people who are not able to set healthy boundaries. They put other people first and they put themselves last. Is a sign of not feeling like they're enough, not being able to stand up for yourself. And this part is starting to play into some of the personality traits that we see from Dr. Sarno's work that are all signs of underlying shame. Okay, the people pleasing. The appeasing and pleasing of others comes out of a lack of being afraid of being abandoned and rejected and criticized again. We need to treat people extra well and extra nice so they don't think poorly of us again. They don't reject us. Okay, there's no chance of that because we don't want to feel that underlying shame. We don't feel good enough to speak the truth or be authentic because we'll be, again, potentially rejected, just like we were as a child. So we start to people please and put other people first to get our needs met, which won't work. Okay. And so that's one of the big personality traits we see. The other one that you'll notice that we see is perfectionism is also born out of shame, because the idea that we need to be perfect or we need to be just right or it has to be a certain way means that if it's not, we don't feel good, we feel bad. It's not good enough. It has to be perfect. It's got to be 100%. That's underlying shame showing its face. We need to look at that personality trait as well. And any of the personality traits where you're over, the word over is in there, overdoing it, overly responsible, overly ambitious, overly caring, okay, overly conscientious. All these things, that the word over means that you feel under, you feel less than. That's why you have to overdo it to feel good. That's a sign of shame in yourself. Afraid to make mistakes, apologizing profusely, also signs of shame. Being obsessive or overly concerned with your appearance, you have to look a certain way because maybe you feel like you don't look good, you don't look good enough. And again, our society reinforces shame at a high level as well, in terms of people's looks, in terms of people's successes in the world, what they're achieving and what they're doing can make us feel very much ashamed, especially when we've come from toxic shame out of childhood. Feeling irrationally guilty is also goes with shame. Guilt is a sister feeling with shame. Okay. Wanting to hide away is a sign of shame, a behavior or component of shame. We want to hide away. We want to hide. We want to go into freeze is another sign of shame. We go into freeze state. Okay. We don't feel lovable we don't feel lovable at some level. We don't feel like we deserve certain things is a sign of shame. Self-sabotage, which is a big one. People are being self-sabotaged just as you start to get better. Something else happens. And know the shoe drops, takes you back down again, makes you feel like a loser, makes you feel like you can't get better. These are all signs of underlying toxic shame. Discounting compliments, people pay you compliments, say you're doing a nice job, and you say, oh no, not really, yeah. You put it back on the other person. You can't accept a compliment. You don't see that you're doing good enough. You can't see your worth. You can't see that you're accomplishing. It's never enough. It's never enough. I need to do more. It's not good enough. It constantly coming from that mindset is showing our underlying shame. Don't feel deserving. So these are some of the underlying signs of shame. And there's many more. I'm just highlighting some of the ones that come to mind here. And maybe this is starting to trigger in yourself and look at some of the ways where shame might be popping up in your life and starting to rear its head. It's very much hidden. It's our deepest emotion. It's the deepest one. It's the bottom of the ocean, I call it. It's our darkest, deepest emotion that we are trying at all costs to avoid, as Gabor Mate said. And if you can imagine that avoidance of shame leads us to do all these personality traits and leads many people to become anxious people because they're very scared of that emotion. They will do everything in their power to avoid feeling that because it's going to mean to them now that they're a bad person. They're, again, feeling rejected, criticized, put down, not enough, abandoned. Okay, and that hits a deep nerve in us from childhood. But like all the other emotions I talk about, we need to face and embrace all our emotions. And shame is one of the biggest ones we need to deal with and reconcile. We'll talk more about that another time. But I really wanted to bring shame into the fold here. If you have questions about this or you think this is operating in your life and you want to learn more how to work with it, because it can be causing somatic symptoms, and you reach out. Again, this is the work I do with people, work with their emotions, working on the psychological side of these physical complaints in the body that people have and aren't going away with regular treatments. So we look at these emotions. So reach out. You can find me at thepainpt.com. I offer group coaching as well. We went over some shame this past month. We'll continue to delve into it into the next year. So if you want to sign up for January 2024, it's a great time to get started. If you want some group coaching support, we meet once a week for 2 hours weekly. And you can also sign up for that on my website, thepainpt.com. So if you made it this far in this video, thanks for listening. Again, give it a thumbs up if you enjoy it. I'll continue to put out content. I really appreciate all of you and looking forward to a great next year. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.